Could Malcolm Spence be the next Arturi Lehkonen as an absolute dog in the top six, supporting elite level talents? We'll be breaking down his game on today's show.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's episode, we'll be breaking down the game of Malcolm Spence, a very fun player who plays the game the right way and NHL teams are going to love on draft day for just how projectable he is to not only play minutes in the NHL, but very effective middle six kind of minutes, and within a pretty short time frame, especially when you're picking outside the top 10. You might get a guy like Malcolm Spence within 2 years, maybe even less. We'll be breaking down his game on today's show. In the first segment, we'll be looking at his profile, where he's being ranked by public outlets, and his overall tools and what's strong among those, like the shot and the playmaking, the skating, for instance. Then the second segment, we're going to look a bit more at the mental habits, the IQ, the hockey sense, how he ticks as a hockey player, and how that's going to project to the NHL level. And finally, we'll wrap up the episode by looking at where he might go on draft day, which NHL players remind me of him stylistically, and which NHL teams might be the very best fit for this player. But before we jump into everything, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, every FanDuel new customer can get over $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Malcolm Spence, let's dig straight into this player's profile. He's a very interesting one. He's been playing with the Erie Otters in the OHL and is already committed to playing in the NCAA next season with the University of Michigan. An excellent place to go develop, and he'll be surrounded by a lot of talent, whether it be first-round selection from last year by the Montreal Canadiens, Michael Hage, or current US NTDP number one center, Cole McKinney. There's going to be a lot of diversity among that offensive core next season, and Michigan's always one of the best development programs in college hockey and just in North America as a whole. So great place for him to keep going to develop. And he is a 6'2", 201-pound left shot left winger. He's a September 22nd, 06 birthday, only 1 week older than the cutoff for the 2024 NHL draft. So among the very oldest players eligible here this season, and this refinement in his game makes a lot of sense when you see that age. He hasn't necessarily changed his game massively this season. He's just kept doing the things he does very, very well. Last year, he was already an assistant captain in his second season. Like, this campaign was his third full campaign in the OHL, and he's played between 64 and 66 games in each of those. He already has loads of experience at the OHL level, and it's understandable that he's taking the next step in competition next campaign in college hockey. But pretty solid progression in terms of production for this player. In his rookie campaign, he had 42 points in 64 games. Then last year, he had 62 points, including 19 goals in 66 games. And this year, he really started popping off as a goal scorer, especially potting 32 goals and 41 assists for 73 points in 65 games to go alongside 57 penalty minutes. He got a bit grittier this season, played more physical, played a bit more on the edge, and overall was just an absolute dog for the Erie Otters, and a player that is able to showcase himself with disruptive energy, skill, and speed every single game. A very pacey kind of player on both sides of the puck. So a guy that has a true NHL kind of projection with his frame, his habits, his tools. They're all very strong aspects, but let's delve into a bit more detail on those tools with Malcolm Spence, because across the board, these are above average as a bare minimum. He's a really quite toolsy player. What he lacks is in terms of pure dynamic skill, in terms of taking over shifts or dissecting defenses. What he does is just play a very interconnected, supported kind of game where he plays off of his line mates. He's able to take very supportive off puck positions, and he just plays with the kind of middle drive and pace that you need that kind of complementary piece to do if you want them to achieve a really high level of play. He's a good skater, not an elite skater, but he skates with real speed and pace and intensity, high stride rate, mechanically a couple flaws, but not a player I'm concerned about in terms of skating. And he's off to the University of Michigan, where he's certainly going to refine that mobility and skating output a little bit. He's a 5.5 grade in terms of our elite prospects grading scale, which we have in the description down below if you want to take a look at it. But basically, a 5 is a baseline NHL projection of just what you would expect for a bottom 6 kind of NHL piece. That's kind of like the baseline. So he's slightly above average in terms of skating, but the shot and the passing and the physicality are all a step above that. They are quite solidly within like a good middle 6 kind of projection. 6th grade shot. It's real powerful, gets it off quickly. He's a real threat to score from both a short and medium range. Not a guy that's going to be like your main one-timer threat on the power play, but definitely a player that can play the bumper, finish chances in those medium ranges really effectively, and just is able to combine quickness, precision, and power on his releases. His passing is also very supportive. A lot of pace, some solid deceptive habits as well in terms of layering in look-offs and getting little hook passes to get around defender sticks or through their skates, slipping passes underneath the defender's triangles as well. He's been quite adaptable in his interconnected passing game, but what he doesn't do is like find absolute dimes of cross-seam passes. He's not going to be like your like elite playmaking kind of forward, but what he does do is elevate the players he's playing with, and because he's playing at such a high pace, you're not expecting him to make these like super long bomb like direct passes of getting directly to a teammate, maybe like a cross seam from like the top of the circle towards the back post. That's not his game. What he does is quick give and goes, and there's a real precision and pace to those plays. Very projectable kind of passer to the NHL level. The handling supports this. It's at the same level as his feet. His hands are able to keep up with his higher speeds as well, but they aren't something that are going to open up a huge amount of opportunities for him. It's a solid like problem-solving tool against single layers of defense, but as soon as like 2 or more defenders start closing in on him, he doesn't have the dynamism or the mobility and agility to escape those situations with control. But last but not least, we have the physicality. And this is an element that is just so projectable to the NHL game. He plays with such intensity, and in the playoffs, especially, you saw ferocity in his game as well. He's able to gain leverage, initiate contact, play inside opposing structures, and he's never afraid to drive the middle of the ice. He's a player that's able to more than hold his own in board battles, and a player that just has a real pro style to how he comports himself on the ice and the battles he initiates, how he is trying to outmaneuver his opposition. There's a real just maturity to these aspects of the game, and that should get him selected likely inside the top 20 on draft day. But that wraps things up here for us in the first segment. In the next one, we're going to be looking at how clever this player is, really delving into the intelligence, because I think that the IQ is the strongest aspect of all of his tools here that we're talking about. And we'll delve a little bit more into how he is just such a disruptive player defensively on the forecheck, and how that could make him a very projectable kind of guy to play middle 6 minutes on a cup run kind of team, especially among the teams that we've been seeing doing cup runs here in recent seasons. We'll be delving into that right after these messages from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in on the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever before to play smart and win big. Which players do you think are going to be showing up in the biggest moments, are going to be the superstars? Or do you have a depth gem who's going to rise to the occasion to make your favorite team win a key playoff game? And if you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back them with a same game parlay, combining the things that you expect to happen to just compound the potential wins in your bet? If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet, and if you win, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's keep this episode rolling here in the second segment, breaking down the game of Malcolm Spence of the Erie Otters, and a player I've loved watching this season. He's not a player that frustrates me whatsoever in my viewings, and after spending a whole season scouting the USHL, it is nice to have a player that isn't overly frustrating for once. And the way that he plays the game, the intelligence, the anticipation, the intensity, the positional awareness, these are all things that are a year or two ahead of the curve, and things that I think are going to bring him all the way to an NHL role as an absolute baseline. And that combination of nuanced IQ in terms of both support habits and ferocity and just pace of decision making and middle drive, with having an absolute dog of a motor on him. Like, this guy on his game is a really middle driven, hard working, difficult to contain player. And those things have combined for some wonderful sequences with the Erie Otters. When he's on his game and at his best, he's not that he's like dictating the play through deft skill. He's just setting the pace by hammering the sprint button and moving up ice, driving the middle lane, pushing defenses back, creating space for his teammates. He's a player that makes the players around him better because he makes their lives significantly easier. And this is the kind of guy that you want in your lineup come playoff time. He's a player that can move up the lineup and make the lives easier of more dynamic and elite players that are playing bigger minutes. Or you can slot down into your middle six, third line, and just be the ideal third line player for you while playing potentially on the penalty kill and a depth role in the power play if you need him to. That versatility and adaptability is hard to come by in free agency or via trade. You kind of have to find that in the draft. It's expensive to acquire players like this otherwise, and they can be had, but you have to basically strike at the right moment when a player's value is low and kind of shepherd them more towards that kind of direction to get them at a cheaper price than you'd be paying for Malcolm Spence at the draft. And I think that would make him a really interesting pick there in the teens for a lot of teams that are on the brink of contention in the playoffs, that want to make that step to being playoff perennials. He's a player that will be able to help you not only get to the playoffs, but to stay in them and to win you games when it matters most. And that's going to make him a high pick on draft day, and maybe not the same top 10 projection that we saw for him heading into the campaign, but still a player that's going to be really, really valuable at the next level and likely also play minutes in the NHL very, very soon. He's such a mature, refined player. I think he's a guy that could potentially even play for the 2026-27 campaign. I don't think that's impossible that he signs an ELC and wins a spot out of camp. I think it's a potentiality depending on how dominant he is next season with the University of Michigan. But if it takes him 2 years, that's fine as well. I just think he's going to be a really solid NHL piece in a very short time span. And if you're a contending team selecting, that's going to be a really, really attractive option for you on draft day. In terms of the habits for Malcolm Spence, this is a player who's able to layer his things, his tools really effectively, whether it be his skating and his physicality on the forecheck, or his shooting and passing ability to make defenders question what he's trying to do, what he's going to do. He's quite adaptable on puck. He's happy to shoot and he's happy to pass, as well as that handling supporting him in his higher speed rushes. These elements work nicely together. They're like wheel cogs in a wash. They just work well together, those gears, and it makes him a very cohesive, comprehensive, and projectable player in that sense. And that's definitely going to get him a pretty significant pick on draft day. And if he falls to the second round, I'd be more than shocked. I would be gobsmacked would be the word I would settle on, because this kind of player, especially right off the back of a very physical playoffs this year, with the Florida Panthers especially making it known that physicality is still kind of the quote unquote meta in the NHL right now, of what is working come playoff time, and what can beat out most other systems. I think this guy is really going to be an interesting player for teams to target on draft day. But one thing I wanted to do here, and a new thing I want to implement in these prospect spotlight episodes, is to read you one full scouting report from one of my colleagues over at Elite Prospects, breaking down the game of the player that we're talking about. I wanted to read one from Mitch Brown here today from January 25th. It was a game between the Erie Otters and the Kitchener Rangers. And Mitch writes, Spence was a driving force for Erie in this game. The primary puck carrier on his line, he attacked the middle with speed, intercepted back pressure, and gained the zone with control, putting his team on the attack. There are lots of dynamic patterns in his game. Crossover bursts, inside play, changes of pace, and an ability to create space for his shots. Also a consistent factor on the cycle, driving off the wall and extending the cycle when he couldn't. He sticks with the play and seemingly always is the first on the puck. It's how he got both of his points in this game. He's a very detailed player overall, playing a safeguarding style first, sometimes at the expense of offensive creation. For example, he could have cut inside and drove the net instead of settling for an outside shot late in the game, and he could have used the weak side teammate more often. But this season, he's always thinking defense first. He's clearly has the tools to become more dynamic with time, and if he does that, he really could become a top 6 forward. More likely, however, he continues down this high cycle, controlling, high detailed style that makes him a long-term middle 6 option, potentially a top 20 pick on draft day. I fully agree with this assessment. I think that this is a projectable player that has enough dynamic qualities to grow into a top 6 projection with time, especially if he's able to take those steps at the University of Michigan here in the coming seasons. But even if that doesn't stick in terms of bringing him to that kind of dynamic top 6 role in the NHL, he has everything else to be a really solid, reliable, and versatile middle 6 piece. And that is just such a valuable kind of profile to add to your squad at the draft. But that wraps things up here for the second segment. In the next one, I wanted to break down where he might go on draft day, what his ceiling and floor are, which NHL players remind me the very most of him, and which team fit makes the most sense for him in the first round. But before that, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. All right, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment, talking about Malcolm Spence of the Erie Otters. And the draft range is very interesting with this player because there's a wide variety of potential possibilities here. I think he go as high as like 10th overall, and could also fall to just beyond the top 20. That 10 to 20 range is kind of where I see him settling here long term at the draft. And let's just break down a little bit of where he's being ranked by public outlets at this stage. By Elite Prospects consolidated rankings, and this is like the averaging out of like 15 or 20 different public rankings. He's at 13th overall. He's at 16th on Bob McKenzie's board, 15th on Craig Button's, 8th for Ryan Kennedy at the Hockey News, and 10th for Chris Peters at Flow Hockey. For us at Elite Prospects, he on our most recent ranking that's actually public at the moment of recording here, at 25th overall. But I do believe he moved up for us for our final board, which is going to be released very, very shortly, settling in and around the 20 range. Not to spoil anything for that just yet. And I think that's kind of the baseline for this player. He's going to be a top 22, top 23 draft selection, but could go higher if a team absolutely falls in love with him. I think this is a guy who's going to be a high character leader, both vocally, but also by example. And a player that, from everything I can tell, is just absolutely beloved in the dressing room. He's a player that his teammates absolutely love. He brings a sense of levity and humor to the dressing room, but also has that competitiveness and is serious when it matters most. And with all these abilities, I think he's going to be a guy that goes in that top 20 range on draft day. But which NHL teams would make the most sense in terms of fits in that range of the draft? First and foremost, I mean, in terms of teams that are selecting exactly this mold of player in like each of the last like 3 seasons at the draft, the Detroit Red Wings, they're selecting at 13th overall. They love their intelligent, projectable, hardworking support players that can elevate elite guys. And you can't build a lineup with 12 of them, which Detroit seemingly wants to do currently. But I would not be surprised if they wanted to add another guy in this mold, especially if they've fallen in love with Malcolm Spence's interview or his combine showing or any other such details. Beyond that, I think the Montreal Canadiens could also make sense. They have 2 picks in that range at 16th and 17th overall. They are quite likely going to trade one of those in a hockey deal to get an established young NHL player that can help them next season. But if they hang on to both, I would not be surprised for them to go for Spence on one of those, because they want to get players in their lineup sooner than in previous seasons at the draft. They don't want to go for just the longest projects anymore at the stage of the rebuild. And he's a guy that could absolutely just slot in and be a hunker down, reliable piece who can move up your lineup and replace that Artturi Lehkonen impact that they lost a couple years ago. Last but not least, the Ottawa Senators also make sense for me at 21st overall. The Sens love their supportive, intense players. Ridley Gregg is also a guy who plays a somewhat similar style to Malcolm Spence, and I can see Ottawa wanting to get another player in that mold to just compete more come playoff time. That wouldn't shock me whatsoever, and because he also has upside in terms of supporting more elite players like your Tim Stützles, like your Drake Bathersons, like your Brady Tkachuks, I think he'd be a really interesting target here for the Sens. But let's talk about those 2 player comps. And I've already mentioned both player names so far in this episode. Ridley Gregg of the Ottawa Senators, but more specifically, Artturi Lehkonen of the Colorado Avalanche. 2 players who play the game the right way. High intensity, always driving the middle of the ice, taking very supportive off-puck positions, being really solid in their own zones, working hard defensively, strong in the penalty kill against the cycle defensively as well, can apply that pressure, but they manage risk really well. They don't overcommit their weight to lead to odd man situations. They're very responsible at remaining on the inside and doing so as wingers much of the time. Greg can also play down the middle, but much of what I've seen of him recently, at least in the NHL, has come on the wing, and he's looked very good in that position in my viewings. I think that these player comps make a lot of sense in terms of what the overall upside is with Malcolm Spence. There is a level of high-end tools and dynamic flashes like you do see with guys like Greg and with Lehkonen. I mean, Lehkonen has been a 50-plus point scorer in the NHL and just one of the best supportive top 6 pieces league-wide in the last half-decade, and did that with the Montreal Canadiens on that cup run. I mean, he scored the goal that sent them to the Stanley Cup final. The year after that with the Colorado Avalanche, he scored the goal that won the Stanley Cup final. He's a clutch player who's there in key moments, but Malcolm Spence brings a little bit more physicality. He's already bigger and heavier than Lehkonen is by about like 3 inches and like almost 30 pounds. So real like workhorse of a player that I think that teams are going to absolutely love in their lineups long term. So I think Spence makes a lot of sense for a bunch of different teams. And with that ceiling as a like potentially top 6, but likely second line Swiss Army knife, complimentary winger who can do a bit of everything, be versatile and adaptable to whatever you throw in his direction. And in terms of floor, I'm looking at a bottom 6 checker. You're getting an NHL piece with this guy, and that makes him a first round pick. You don't really get guarantees in the second round anymore, but here in the mid first round, you still could with Malcolm Spence, a player that just plays the game the right way. If you've watched him play, I'd love to hear about your thoughts on him in the comments down below, because he's the kind of player that especially if you're an Erie Otters fan, if you've been watching him year in, year out for the last 3 seasons, that you must just absolutely adore, because he just plays the game so reliably, so intelligently, scores when it matters, and all of these elements that you just love in your clutch players, and doing so as a young player, right? Like he's just draft eligible now, and he's already has 3 full, reliable, strong OHL seasons under his belt. yeah, this guy's an NHL player. He has every element to play in the league and within a pretty short time frame as well. So Malcolm Spence is a fantastic prospect and a player that should be going top 20 on draft day. So let me know in the comments down below, what's your range for him at the draft? Which team do you think makes the most sense as a landing spot for this player? And what's the overall ceiling you see in his game? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. We always appreciate our everydayers here on the pod. And for your second listen, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything you need to know to build yourself a competitive and sustainable fantasy roster. That's everything from me today. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I'm your host, Sebastian High, and I'll catch you tuning in again very, very soon.